So, hi everyone. Hi Stephanie. Thank you so much for being with me today. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what are you doing at Lyft?
Yeah, so I'm a senior social media strategist at Lyft, and I focus mainly on the data and analytics side of things. So, mainly pulling our data on a day to day and analyzing it for our overall organic social channels. So, we sit under the brand marketing umbrella here at Lyft, and I love, the team that we get to work on and just being able to really build the rideshare business and build our brand to the best that we can. We definitely want to be known as one of the best, brands across social. So we're working day to day really hard on making that happen for us. But I've been doing social media strategy for different brands in the past and, consulting for brands and companies. And what I really love about social media is the natural curiosity that I have to learn around it, the connecting, brands to their target consumers. And at the end of the day, like I love making like my dreams a reality and very driven to be able to kind of deliver for the brands that I work on. So I'm very grateful for the team that I work on here at Lyft. And I think at the end of the day, I bring passion and energy to everything that I do. And data and analytics has been a very great skill set to have and something that I'm honing more as my strength here at Lyft.
Good. I think passion and energy are two key elements for everyone in the industry.
Yeah.
So can you describe how your days look like? I know that at some point for the social media managers, maybe they want to change what they are doing and they want to start to work as a strategist in maybe an agency or for a brand. Can you tell us a bit about your program or how your days look like?
Yeah, because my focus is mainly on data analytics and insights, I lead the day-to-day reporting and measurement of our organic social channels. So it's anything from like building social recap reports on a monthly, quarterly basis to measuring it on a day-to-day. So if we put out a piece of content, giving it at least, 72 hours to measure it and track how it's performing. And even when it's in real time, like, is it going to be going over performance? Is it going to go viral, hopefully, or just how it's performing on the day-to-day and informing our internal stakeholders and even our creative teams who are the ones who are creating that content. Just taking away the key learning. So what can we learn from every piece of content that we're putting out into our channels, as well as just informing our key executives, our key stakeholders on tracking and analyzing our performance across campaigns, initiatives, our evergreen, like everyday content, to overall channel performance and health, as well as best practices per channel and algorithm changes. So if like Instagram tomorrow changes something, I'll be the first one to kind of update the team on what's happening and how we can tailor it to our strategy on a day-to-day. So kind of just setting our benchmarks, our KPIs, and analyzing our content if it reaches it, if it's above it, or if it's below it, to basically kind of give a definition of if it's good, bad, in between for all of our content. So very much in the measurement on the day-to-day side.
Wow. It seems that your numbers are your best friends, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I first started, it was kind of just overseeing everything because we are a
Yeah.
very small, nimble team. And then as we kept growing, we just knew the importance of the more content you're producing out there and putting into the world. Like you need to measure it at the end of the day and figure out the performance because you don't know what you don't know. And you can't continue to replicate what's working or stop what's not working if you don't really measure it and take the time to actually focus on the numbers.
Yeah, true. So can you tell us some key elements for creating a good to great social media strategy?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I was mentioning, like being data first and having it be very data driven, I think is going to be really successful in turning something good to something great. I think it's just very important to be looking at that and making sure that it's measurable. But at the end of the day, what's really great about organic social is that it's all about brand affinity, a brand love, and engagement. So you want to be able to kind of measure that, but also it's a long run. It's not going to be the instant result and instant conversions. Like what we think about is organic social is from our Instagram posts. We're not assuming that they're immediately going to book a Lyft ride. We would hope to, but we don't measure it like that so quickly. Like that's where you get that's what you focus on in paid because you're able to really target that consumer. In organic, you're reaching such a broad audience. So I think being able to focus on that, having engagement be the core metric. For us, it's engagement rate. So it's focusing on like, are people really seeing your content, but also taking the time to engage with it? And at the end of the day too, it's understanding your consumer. So being very consumer centric. We want to be able to know and understand the behaviors and interests of our target audience that we're really trying to reach. Like, where are they? If it's Gen Z, what platform are they on? What are they doing on those platforms? What actions are they taking? What videos are they watching? And really kind of building that persona and embracing that when you're creating content. Like, if I was this person, would I like this? Would I engage with this? Would I share this with my friend? And really taking a step back on understanding that consumer more and understanding who they are, where they live, just even like the nitty gritty stuff, because at the end of the day, that's who you're serving this content to.
Yeah, true. We did a research at the beginning of the year, the life of a social media manager. So increasing engagement and getting engagement is a struggle for more than 60% for social media managers. So I think you and your team are not the only one that looking at this key element and define a good social media strategy. Can you tell us, how did your passion for social media start?
Yeah, I would say it started back in college. I grew up writing, and I've just been a big fan of it, from like writing for newspapers and magazines. And I've just been very much into the journalism route. That's what I majored in. And I want to say it was back in 2009 when there was a shift from print magazines to digital.
Yeah.
It was obviously a shift in the economy, and everything was moving to digital, all my favorite magazines. And so as much as I wanted to shift to digital, I knew it was kind of just like a really tricky industry to be in, with so much shifts and changes happening. And so I really wanted just to help businesses also with the communication aspect, but more into like the marketing aspect as well. And I knew that digital had to be the route that I wanted to go through, to have like long-term like stability and to be challenged, and have an innovative industry too. Because when social media came out around like 2009, 2008, when like Facebook and Twitter was starting to tailor to brands and like more of a marketing aspect, I'm like, oh, there's something here. And I really love to write. And I'm like, can I combine these two? And so there was such a need for it at the end of the day. Like, all the organizations in college and even my internships at the time were trying to, start a Facebook page and Twitter, and they're not really sure what to do and didn't really know who knew, because it was brand new for everyone. So I was like, I'll do it. Like, I volunteered. And ever since then, it's kind of been like that niche that I've built for myself, and I've never left the industry. There's always been a need to, like, social media is not going away anytime soon. So it's even becoming more and more powerful. So building a niche for myself was something that I really wanted to do, and be a subject matter expert in it, I feel like was really something that could help me stand out from the crowd. So it was something that I feel like I'm always challenged, and in a good way, like there's always something new to learn, a new platform. And everybody, it's just the most powerful form of marketing, I feel, and everyone kind of needs it in a certain aspect for their industry or their business. So I feel like there's always like that curiosity that it's always filled for me, that I always get to like just explore a new tool or new platform. So yeah, I really do enjoy it.
Good. So in terms of skills that you have to develop to become a social media manager, you mentioned that you have to be a good communicator. Would you like to add something else?
Yeah, I think, just having that natural curiosity. I think being able to consume social media from a personal aspect, and understand the platforms and algorithms from a personal day-to-day aspect, but then translating that into a business lens too. I think those, like, just because maybe someone has an Instagram profile doesn't mean that they're an expert in social media strategy. Like, being able to take a step back and figure out, like, how does what you're doing on social media tie back to the business goals? I think that's essential in any job. Is like, how can you make this go back and reach your ROI for your business? How can you tailor it in that aspect? I think attention to detail, like proper grammar, like whatever we do online is very public facing. So everything you put out into the world has to be very much attention to detail, because you are representing your brand and your personal brand at the end of the day. So I think that's very strong. I think the agility aspect of it is moving fast. Like, social's fast, social's quick. If you want to hop on trends, if you want to be successful, you have to be very nimble and agile. And then just being proactive and thinking ahead. Like, if there's a trend that comes out, it's not just hopping on every trend, it's figuring out, okay, we need to hop on this quick, but how can this tailor to our brand? How can we have our brand personality come through into this trend? And even if it's a fit, identifying if like, okay, this trend comes out, it doesn't make sense for our brand to be a part of this conversation, then let's sit this out. Or no, this is actually a perfect opportunity for us to be a part of the conversation. So I think I identifying those. And then I think just being able to pivot and be very resilient in this industry, I think is very important too, because as we know, like there used to be platforms like Foursquare and Google Plus and Vine, and now there's TikTok, and who knows what tomorrow will bring. So I think being able to pivot your strategy and figure out which platforms are working for you and which ones you need to adjust strategy to. And if there's a brand new one that comes out, then does it make sense for your brand to be a part of that and being able to strategize around that. So I think a lot of those are really great skills to have, but there's so many more, but I think those are probably some of the top.
Yeah. Of course, I think that it's important to have some basic design skills, because if you're at the beginning of your job, it requires sometimes to do the design for the social media managers. And maybe if you don't know Photoshop, but there are other tools like Canva where you can create those design for the brand that you are working for. Stephanie, how would you describe social media today?
I would say it's the most authentic that I've seen in terms of just how people consume content. I think before, when social media, like especially when Instagram came out, and still to a certain extent, it's very much about aesthetic and perfectionism and this beautiful, glamorous life that has no flaws. And I think people are seeing through that. People are kind of fed up with just like the polished look of social media. And I think people just want to authentically connect and have emotional connection with people. And people just want to seek the authentic side of you. And even for brands too, like I think trying to be perfect and really trying to make sure everything is super polished online is just not something people are attracted to. I mean, we see it in the data numbers for both organic and paid, that the more authentic the content looks like, the more native it is to the platforms. And the more that your real self can come out, like that's what people are gravitating towards and really want to be a part of and build communities around, because it's that vulnerability that people connect with. And so I think that's what's really cool to see. And even with new platforms like Be Real, where people can really kind of like capture the moment of where they are and not being able to put on this facade of like they're living this glamorous life. I think it's very competitive too, because I think when we first started out, it was like just Facebook and Twitter and then a new platform. And now there's so many options and so many, I wouldn't say distractions, but there's so many different platforms to be on at the moment. So there's so many choices. And I think for a brand, it's really significant now to stand out and figure out a strategy that works for you, that kind of makes it ownable to you on a platform. So you can kind of like beat the competition and kind of really gain that consumer's attention, because there's so much to look at online now. There's so many platforms to be on, and people are spending their time so differently now because there's so many options. So I think being able to stand out. And then I think it's such a powerful tool at the end of the day. Like there's so much that you can be done on social media. So I feel like there's so much power in storytelling and ways to express that visually. I mean, video has become so forefront in social than it was before when it was just static images. So there's so many ways to tell a story. So I think it's just become more and more powerful as the years go on.
Yeah. And that's why I think TikTok has a huge success today, because people are more real. People are show how they are in the real life. And I think this was the first mistake that Instagram did in the past. And now they are trying to shift and go to present the reality and not a life with filters.
Yeah.
What are the most important lessons you've learned through the years?
I think at the end of the day, I think providing value is so important on social. I think everyone assumes like, let me have a social media profile and let me just put content out there and not really kind of take a step back of like, what am I trying to say? What's the point of this piece of content? What do I want the consumer to take away from this? So being able to think at the end of the day, I want to provide value. I want someone who has opened up their Instagram app and is scrolling and is taking the time to consume content. How can I take the 1, 2, 3 seconds that I have of their attention and really grab that attention and deliver a strong message? Like, what am I trying to get across? And clearly identifying that singular message, I think has been super important, because sometimes you want consumers to do everything. You want them to subscribe subscribe and click and watch, engage, and do so many things. And at the end of the day, like you only have like 1 second to really capture their attention. Like what value, what message am I trying to deliver? And really kind of be very concise and clear about that, I think has been very important. I think don't overthink it. I think that's something that like as professionals in the industry and obviously representing a brand, you want everything to look picture perfect on social and to be very representative. And when at the end of the day, like you have to experiment. I think that's what the best part of social media. It's having that courage to fail. It's having the courage to put content out there that probably isn't super perfect or super polished, but at the end of the day still looks polished in terms of a brand perspective, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And maybe it might actually not perform well. Maybe it'll go viral. Maybe it'll overperform. I guess you don't know what you don't know until you try. And I think having that courage to try and try again and keep trying until you figure out what works is the best approach. Like no one is going back to your feed from 5 years ago to say, oh, remember that one post that brand did like 5 years ago? Like people are constantly on their phones and they're constantly consuming content that it only lasts like 20, maybe 24 hours in their feed. And then they're kind of just gone. So it's kind of that testing ground of being able to not overthink and just do it and dive into the platform and test it. Like TikTok is a great example of that. Like, for all of us. No one really knew how to nail the algorithm right off the bat when it first came out. We just had to put up videos out there and just see if it worked and if it didn't. So having that courage and not overthinking when it's building that, building a platform or building a strategy. And then one thing that I feel like Lyft does so well, and I'm just so proud of being part of a company like this, is leaning into your values. Identifying those core values that you as a brand or even you as a person too on social, that what are you going to stand for? So at least those 2 to 3 keywords that you feel like really resemble your core values, and leaning into them in everything you do, like every piece of content, everything you do. Like words like don't mean anything if they don't follow through with action. And I think that's what we do really well. And that's what we're known for from our competition. I think it's everything that we do like on social represents those core values. And so I think that's something really important too. And because everything is so transparent on social, your audience will call you out if you do things that doesn't resemble what you say and doesn't align with those core values. I think you need to like walk the walk and talk the talk. Like I think that's something that's super important. That's definitely a lesson that I've learned throughout the years. And then consistency too. I think a struggle that I've seen is that with all these platforms, of course, they want you to spend so much time on it. So they want every brand or any kind of company that's on the platforms to create high volumes of content. Like they even say posting on TikTok 2 to 3 times a day is like the best way to reach your goals. But sometimes that's not feasible for brands to be able to create such high volume all the time, every day. So I think for me, what's really important is that you want to build trust with your audience. And the way to build trust is consistency. So even if you're not able to hit that high mark of 2 to 3 posts per day, it's being able to at least set a cadence of, okay, well, I'm going to try like once a day, but being able to show up and show up consistently, or if it's once a week to start out and then build on that. I think being able to like show up for your audience in a consistent way just shows that they're able to rely on you for a certain piece of content or a certain value that they're looking for that you provide them. So I think that's also very important, because sometimes we get so excited and create so much content and then we go silent on channels for months. And then we go back on, and then then our audience doesn't really know what to expect, and they're just kind of gonna get sick of it and gonna continue scrolling. So I think building that trust with your audience is super important.
True. I resonate a lot with what you said in the beginning, to provide value for your audience. I have a lot of meetings with my team here at Socialinsider where I'm asking them what's in it for our buyer persona. Is this messages or the post that you are writing for today produce in any way value for our user persona or for our buyer persona? So if you have this question in mind, what's in it for them, I think it's really important when creating content, when doing your strategy or planning the strategy for social media. What are the most significant challenges you face it in your career?
I think the most significant has been when we first started out on social, it was primarily static images. it was just photos. I remember like when Instagram first came out, everything was very static images and just native features that the platforms provided you, like polls or things like that. But then the shift to video happened, I want to say around 2014, 2015 with Facebook Live and Facebook and Instagram, like they were pushing video content so much. So I think at that point, it was such a pivotal moment in my career, because being able to lead teams that was focused on static images to then shift to video, and not growing up with having a video background in my career, it was a turning point of like, well, now I have to learn this on the spot and learn it with my team. So I think that was a great moment of hiring people that are much smarter than you in an industry that's new. Like I was hiring video editors, video directors, and not having experience in videos, and then learning from them and building that skill set that now I have in my toolbox that I'm so grateful for, and being able to learn together. I think that shift to video, and obviously it's not going anywhere, like video is consuming all of our content, and it's kind of the format that we're all leaning in towards. So I think that was something very pivotal. That was a challenge, but that ended up being like really one of my greatest strengths, because that's all that I started focusing on ever since then. I also feel like there's been such a shift in like data privacy, obviously, since like the elections in 2016. Like there's been this like layer of like mistrust with like audience and social media platforms. So I think that's also something of like just letting brands know, or letting like your consumers know that like brands are very transparent. I think being able to own that transparency and being very forefront with your audience, it's really important, just because like that shift of trust. I think creating boundaries for myself when it comes to work-life balance, because being in social too, like, some people think, oh, I just want to be able to like leave the job and leave it at work and being able to disconnect. But being in social, you can never really disconnect. Like it's a 24/7 job. So being able to have those healthy boundaries of maybe having like a work phone that has all of my social media icons for work, and then being able to have a personal phone that doesn't have that, or having certain hours of a day where I consume personally my content and then focus for my brand on social media. So kind of like setting those boundaries too, so there's not that exhaustion of over consuming sometimes. And then just being a woman in the industry and a woman of color, always trying to make sure like I'm proving my worth and like knowing so much into like my root of what I provide to the table and what I provide in value, and making sure my voice is heard, and having that diversity and inclusion aspect too, and bringing that perspective to the table has been very important for me as a person too, when I'm creating content, just making sure that diversity and inclusion is always in the forefront, and very much heard, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I think that most of the challenges that you mentioned apply to everyone these days, or almost everyone, because we have to face it. Everyone who wants to be on social media, they have to create videos. So now we have to hire someone, or maybe we have to develop some video skills to create those videos. And yeah, I think thank you so much for telling us these things from your heart. Can you tell us some key elements that you have to include in your social media content to get engagement, to increase engagement?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking of a piece of content, you're really trying to figure out like, what is it going to look like? What is the creative? What's the singular message? I think you want to make sure it's actionable. And like I mentioned before, having a very clear call to action. I think you want to be able to spell out what you want the consumer to do once they see this piece of content. And I think sometimes sometimes we overthink it, but it can be simply asking a question, and not necessarily like a yes or no question. Like if you're an ice cream brand saying, do you like ice cream? Yes or no? It's like, what kind of flavors do you like? Kind of like asking more broader questions that it requires your audience to think a little bit and to have fun with it, and not have a simple answer and continue scrolling. I think people underestimate polls. Like polls are some of our best performing pieces of content, because you're giving people something really easy to do and something easy to engage with. And that's something that they want, because at the end of the day, they're so cluttered with so many options in their feed as they're scrolling, and you're interrupting their feed when you're putting out a piece of content, and not in a bad way, but if you're going to interrupt their feed, give them something fun to engage with. So I think asking questions is something very simple and very singular on how you can get them to engage. I think too, it's like what's really ownable to your brand as well. So I think having that signature brand look and feel can come across very native and authentic, but it makes it very ownable to you. Like whenever we put out a piece of content, we're like, how do we know this is Lyft? Like, how do we know like this is coming from us versus anybody else? So kind of having that signature look that kind of gives people an idea of like, oh, I know this is totally Lyft's series, or this is their post. Like having that repeatable format that people are really know you for, and that's very signature. I also think that like it's just adding like I think properly like advocating for like what you're standing up for. So I think what's really important for us is like leaning into our values. And so whenever we put out a piece of content, we know that like whenever we stand up for something that we really believe in, our audience also rallies around that and they share it and they want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of something bigger than them and a bigger cause. And especially if we have a stance or a POV of like, if something's happening and we really feel strongly about it, we're going to voice our opinion and this is the action we're going to take. And whenever we create that content that really shows that we have a point of view on something, then that's when people rally around it and support us and also want to be a part of that conversation with us because they also align with those values too. I think it's something that if you develop a point of view, then that's what really helps you stand out. Because if you stand for everything or if you don't say anything, then it doesn't mean anything to anybody. And I think you need to be able, like, you can't just be like, you can't just be one for everybody. Like, I think you have to have a POV and really stand strong against it. And I think people, the right audience will rally against it and rally with you.
Yeah. The people that share the same values with your brand, with the brand that have those values. Why it's important to look at data? So I know you are a data-driven social media strategist. Why people and why it's important for social media managers to look at data?
Yeah, I think for me, and what's really important, why I have such a strong interest in it, is that you can't deny the numbers. I think it's so helpful to be able to come into a conversation and being able to have the data to back anything that you do and to prove what you're trying to advocate for. Like, I think what's really important, especially with any stakeholders we interact with, but especially with the senior executives, it's being able to come in and sell your strategy too. If I want to be able to promote a series that we want to do, if we wanted to start doing a talk show series, let's say, I want to be able to take the data of previous content we've done or content that's already existing out there and seeing how it's performing and being able to come to the table and say, look at these data points. This is showing that this is working, or this is showing that it's not working. And we can either continue with the series or not do the series, or it could kind of just help shut down any conversation or help advocate for what you're trying to sell in. So I think at the end of the day, like, it's so important to understand how your content is performing and being able to shift strategy according to that. And being also cognizant of, like, once you also analyze the data, you need to continue to also analyze it in a certain time period as well, which is why we're always having this cadence of weekly performance, monthly, and even quarterly, and then taking the whole year, the year in review. Being able, because the data shifts constantly with the algorithms and content from the day you posted it to maybe a week or two or months after can always shift. And I think being able to have that pulse on how things are performing is so powerful, and it's only going to continue to grow with, Web3 and how we analyze data. I think it just helps make any decision, and it's so powerful when you're able to take the data and tell a story with it, and being able to visualize that for folks too. I think that's also like such a great skill set to have, and something that I'm also learning with different stakeholders that are very invested in the data. Like, we're hungry for data at Lyft, and it's just able to show what you're doing. And even with the creative team that we work closely with, they love to see how their content is performing. So being able to show the data, because it can be overwhelming. It's kind of intimidating to look at a lot of numbers. And I've noticed that too. And I feel like as much as you're able to show a story with it and being able to show the context and show the bigger picture, I think is super important in social media. And I think that's something that, don't overlook it. Take a look at your insights dashboard and analytics and really take the time to see what's working, what's not working. And it's really fascinating how you can evolve as a brand once you do look at that.
Yeah. True. And my last question for you is, how do you measure success in social media?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is we've been kind of taking a metric and looking at our KPIs and benchmarks and figuring out how does our engagement rate look across all of our channels. And we calculate that, and then we look at the industry, and then we take piece by piece, post by post, all of our content and seeing how it stacks against our KPIs. So does it reach our KPI benchmarks? Does it go above it? Does it go below it? And analyze that in terms of engagement rate to see if it's a successful piece of content. And then from there, it's taking meaningful engagement. And what I mean by that is, what engagement type can people do on a post? Liking, commenting, sharing, saving, but what takes the most effort? Obviously, at the end of the day, we want our content to have such a high reach and get so many more eyeballs than it does now. So we want to take the one that's heaviest to engage with. Like, it's easy just to tap like and then continue scrolling on your feed, which is still great. We still want likes, but it's so much heavier for somebody to comment, tag a friend, and then on top of that, to share that piece of content in their feed and their networks with their friends. That is what you want at the end of the day for anyone. You want people to share this. So, but that's a heavier ask. So it's tailoring your content to make sure it's shareable is what you ultimately want. And then from there, comments and likes and all of those kind of follow through. But I think taking those metrics and really trying to aim for the more meaningful engagement is what we feel like makes a content piece successful. And then, are people following you after seeing this content too? Like, TikTok is obviously taking a step further in the data analytics side, and they're showing you with every video you're putting out there, are people following you after they're watching? Are they sharing it? Are they commenting on it? Then are they liking it? In that order, it's how they're detecting if it gets on the For You page. So that's how you're seeing the shifts in platforms, that they're valuing those actions that are a heavier lift for a consumer. And I think kind of looking at those benchmarks, we determine if it's a successful piece of content for us. But I think something that's very quantitative. But if I were to say something about qualitative, I think, do you feel proud about this piece of content? I think as a team, if we put out a piece of content and it goes viral or it gets high, it goes above average for our benchmarks, do we feel proud of this content? Does it feel like it aligns with our creative guidelines, but then also for our strategy and overall values? Like, if this were to spread across the internet, do we feel proud that it represents our brand and it makes us feel good? I think that also is something to take into consideration.
Great. So I think I've got a lot of ideas on how to to look at the things that we're doing on social media. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing what you're doing and how we should look at data and why the data is so important to analyze our performance, the content, to look at the competitors and so on. Thank you so much for sharing this with me today.
Thank you so much for the time, and again, such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.